I want to talk to you today about something we all face: challenges. Life isn't always easy. There are days when you'll feel like you're walking through fire, moments when the weight of your struggles makes it hard to breathe, and you're not sure how you'll make it through. But I'm here to tell you God will make a way. In life, challenges are a given. No one is immune to difficulty, and no matter who you are, at some point you will face obstacles that test your strength, your resolve, and your faith. These challenges may come in many forms: financial hardships, broken relationships, loss of a loved one, or health struggles. They may be professional or personal, but make no mistake, they will come. It's part of the human experience. But what we need to understand is that while challenges are inevitable, they do not define us. How we respond to them does. Every challenge you face, big or small, carries a lesson. It's through adversity that we grow, that we learn about our own resilience and our capacity to overcome. But in those moments when the weight feels unbearable, when the darkness seems too thick to cut through, it's easy to believe that you are alone. You feel isolated, like no one else can understand the pain, the fear, or the doubt that you carry. Yet, that's where the truth becomes crucial: you are not alone. It's a hard truth to grasp when you're in the middle of your storm. You may feel abandoned, like everyone else is moving on with their lives while you're stuck in a cycle of struggle. But remember, appearances can be deceiving. Behind every smiling face, there's a story of trial and tribulation. The challenges you face are not unique to you, and you are never the only one going through hardship. More importantly, God is with you through it all. Even when you can't feel Him, even when you think your prayers are falling on deaf ears, He is there. We often think that silence means absence, but sometimes silence means He's working behind the scenes, preparing the way for your breakthrough. In the middle of your challenge, you may not see the end, but God already knows it. He sees the bigger picture. What feels like an ending to you could be the beginning of something far greater than you ever imagined. Our problem is that we often equate God's presence with a lack of problems. We think that if God is with us, everything should be smooth and easy. But that's not how life works, and that's not how God operates. His promise was never to keep us from challenges. His promise was to be with us through them. That's a key distinction. He is there in the pain, in the confusion, in the heartbreak. His presence doesn't eliminate the storm, but it gives you the strength to endure it. When you feel alone, it's easy to focus on the challenge itself. The problem becomes the center of your world. You replay it in your mind, you worry about what might happen, and before you know it, the challenge has consumed you. But in those moments, it's important to shift your focus from the problem to the presence of God. He is with you every step of the way, guiding you even when you can't see it or feel it. His presence is steady, unwavering, and that's what you need to hold on to. Remember, the enemy wants you to feel isolated. He wants you to believe that no one understands what you're going through, that you're fighting your battles alone. But that's a lie. There is power in recognizing that not only are you surrounded by people who care for you, but also that the Creator of the universe is walking with you through every trial. He sees your tears, He knows your fears, and He's already working on your behalf, even in the darkest moments. It's in those darkest moments that God often does His greatest work. Think about it. How many times have you looked back on a difficult situation only to realize that it was during those times that you grew the most? It's during the struggle that your faith is strengthened, that your character is refined, and that your dependence on God becomes absolute. Those challenges you face are not there to break you, they're there to build you into the person you were meant to be. Challenges will always be a part of life, but they don't have to define your life. What defines you is how you respond to those challenges. Will you let them defeat you, or will you rise above them, trusting that God is by your side, giving you the strength you need to keep moving forward? It's not easy. No one said it would be. But when you know you're not alone, when you understand that God is walking with you, carrying you when you're too weak to carry yourself, it changes everything. One of the hardest things to do in life is to trust when you can't see a way out. When the road ahead looks impossible, when the mountain seems too steep to climb, it's easy to give in to despair. But that's exactly when you need to lean on God the most. That's when you need to remind yourself that you are not alone. God is there, and He will make a way for you, even when there seems to be no way. Faith is a powerful thing. It gives us hope, it lifts our spirits, and it keeps us grounded when everything around us is shifting. But faith, real faith, is not something you know you have until it's been tested. When life is smooth, it's easy to talk about faith. It's easy to say you believe, to say you trust in God when everything is going well, when the blessings are visible, and the path is clear. But what happens when things take a turn for the worse? What happens when the security you once had crumbles, and you find yourself in the midst of a storm? That's when the real test of faith begins. In those moments, when the ground beneath you feels like it's shaking, when uncertainty creeps in, faith becomes more than just words. It becomes the very thing that holds you together. Hard times strip away the superficial, they expose what's really in your heart. When everything is falling apart, the strength of your faith or the lack of it will become evident. It's easy to have faith when you're on top of the mountain, but when you're deep in the valley, that's when faith has to come alive. The thing about hard times is that they force us to confront what we truly believe. Do you believe that God is with you, even when you can't feel Him? Do you believe that He's working for your good, even when the situation seems hopeless? Faith isn't just about trusting God in the good moments, it's about holding on when there's no clear way out. It's about trusting that even though you can't see the whole picture, God can. Faith in hard times means trusting that God's plan is bigger than your pain, and that He is working things out in ways you may not understand. When life is easy, faith is a comfortable thing to have. It doesn't require much from you. But when life becomes hard, faith asks you to step out into the unknown, to walk in the dark, trusting that God will guide your steps. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's natural to want control, to want answers, to want certainty. But faith often calls us to let go of those things. It calls us to trust even when we don't have all the details, even when we don't know what tomorrow holds. In the hardest times, faith becomes a lifeline. It becomes the thing that keeps you moving forward when every part of you wants to give up. It's in those moments that your faith is truly tested. You see, faith isn't just about believing that God can do something. It's about believing that God is good, even if the outcome isn't what you hoped for. It's about trusting that He has a plan, even when your plan falls apart. That's the kind of faith that is only forged in the fire of adversity. When you're tested, your faith grows stronger because you learn to rely on God in a way you never had to before. In hard times, you're forced to let go of your own strength, your own understanding, and lean fully on God. It's in those moments of surrender, when you've done all you can and all that's left is to trust, that your faith is refined. Hard times stretch your faith, but they also deepen it. They take you from a place of surface-level belief to a deeper, more intimate trust in God. Faith that hasn't been tested is like a muscle that hasn't been exercised. It's there, but it's weak. Testing, though painful, strengthens your faith. It pushes you beyond what you thought you were capable of. It teaches you patience, endurance, and resilience. It teaches you that faith is not a crutch, but a foundation that can withstand even the fiercest storms. When your faith is tested, you learn that it's not about how strong you are, but how strong your trust in God is. The Bible is full of stories of people whose faith was tested in hard times. Think about Abraham, asked to sacrifice his son. Think about Job, who lost everything but refused to curse God. Think about the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years, holding on to the promise of the promised land. In each of these stories, the testing of faith wasn't easy. It was painful, confusing, and required a level of trust that went beyond human understanding. But in each case, God was faithful. And through their tests, their faith grew stronger. Hard times reveal the depth of your faith. They show you where your trust really lies. Do you trust God only when things go your way? Or do you trust Him when life turns upside down? It's in the moments of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty that faith becomes real. It's not about having all the answers, it's about trusting the one who does. It's about believing that even though the storm is raging, God is still in control, and He is with you through it all. Faith in hard times doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It doesn't mean you won't have doubts. But it means that despite those feelings, you choose to believe, you choose to trust, you choose to hold on to the promises of God, even when everything around you is telling you to give up. That's when faith becomes strongest, when it's tested, when it's pushed to its limits, when it's all you have left to hold on to. Hard times have a way of shaking everything up. They force us to let go of the superficial, the comfortable, and the easy. But they also offer us the chance to build something real, something lasting. That something is faith. And it's in the hardest moments that faith proves its true strength. When the storm has passed, when the dust settles, you'll look back and realize that your faith didn't just survive the hard times, it thrived. Because faith, when tested, becomes stronger than ever before. In a world that moves at a breakneck speed, we often find ourselves caught in the relentless pursuit of instant gratification. We want everything now: the promotion, the relationship, the resolution to our problems. We live in a culture that tells us that success is measured by how quickly we achieve our goals. But in the midst of this hustle, there is an important truth we must remember: God's timing is perfect. It doesn't always align with our timeline, and that can be incredibly frustrating. Yet it is in that very frustration that we find an opportunity to deepen our faith. God is not bound by time as we are. While we see only the present moment and are anxious about what comes next, God exists outside of time. He sees the beginning and the end. He knows the intricate details of your life and how each piece fits together in the grand tapestry He is weaving. When you find yourself in a season of waiting, it's easy to doubt God's plan. It's easy to feel abandoned or forgotten. But during these times, remember that God is orchestrating events in your life that you may not yet understand. His perspective is far broader than ours. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's perfect timing. Take Abraham, for instance. God promised him a son, yet Abraham and Sarah waited decades for that promise to be fulfilled. Their impatience led them to try and force a solution, resulting in complications that echoed throughout history. But in the end, God delivered on His promise when the time was right, reminding us that His plans are never late, but often far better than we could have imagined. Consider Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and spent years in prison, seemingly abandoned by God. Yet, in those years of waiting, God was preparing him for a pivotal role in Egypt that would ultimately save many lives, including those of his own family. Joseph's story teaches us that even in our darkest moments, when we feel forgotten and forsaken, God is working behind the scenes. His timing was perfect, and He had a greater purpose in mind. Waiting can feel like an eternity. When you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see past your immediate circumstances. Your mind races with questions: why isn't this happening for me? What's taking so long? Will I ever get to where I want to be? These thoughts can consume us, leading to anxiety and frustration. But in those moments, it's crucial to shift your focus from the clock to God's promises. Remember that waiting is not a sign of God's absence, but an invitation to trust Him more deeply. God's timing often requires us to develop patience, a virtue that is increasingly rare in our fast-paced world. Patience is not merely the ability to wait, it's how we act while we wait. It's about cultivating a spirit of peace and trust in God's plan, even when everything within us wants to rush ahead. Patience teaches us reliance on God and helps us grow in character. In the waiting, we learn to let go of our timelines and embrace the beautiful, albeit sometimes painful, process of growth. During these seasons of waiting, it's also important to stay connected to God. Prayer becomes your lifeline. It's through prayer that you can express your fears, your frustrations, and your hopes. It's in these intimate conversations with God that you can align your heart with His. God invites you to share your heart with Him and to seek His guidance. The more you draw near to Him, the more you'll find comfort in His presence and reassurance in His timing. Remember that your journey is uniquely yours. Just because someone else seems to be moving ahead faster doesn't diminish your path. God has a specific purpose for your life, and His timing is perfectly tailored to fulfill that purpose. It's easy to look at others and compare your progress, but comparison can lead to discontentment and discouragement. Instead, focus on what God is doing in your life. Celebrate the small victories and the lessons learned along the way. When you embrace God's timing, you open yourself up to the possibility of something greater than you could have envisioned. Sometimes what you think you want may not align with what God knows you need. His timing allows Him to work all things together for your good, creating a beautiful story in your life. Trusting in His perfect timing means believing that every delay has a purpose, every setback is a setup for a comeback, and every closed door is an opportunity for something better. As you navigate the waiting periods in your life, remember that God's timing is not about punishment or neglect. It's about preparation and purpose. He is preparing you for what lies ahead, shaping your character, building your strength, and equipping you for the future He has in store for you. You may not see it now, but God is using this time to align you with His perfect plan. Embrace the waiting as a gift rather than a burden. Recognize that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels like you're stuck in limbo. Allow yourself to grow in faith, trust, and patience as you navigate the uncertainty. Keep your eyes on Him, and remember that He is always working behind the scenes. When the time is right, He will reveal His plan for you in a way that is more beautiful and fulfilling than you could have ever imagined. When we talk about faith, we often envision a peaceful, reflective state of being, a sense of calm assurance that everything will work out in the end. However, true faith is not merely a passive waiting game, it requires action. Faith calls us to step out of our comfort zones, to take risks, and to actively engage with our beliefs. It is about believing in something so profoundly that we are willing to put that belief into action, even when the path forward is unclear. In the Bible, we see countless examples of individuals whose faith led them to take bold actions. Think of Noah, who built an enormous ark long before the first raindrop ever fell. His faith in God's warning about an impending flood prompted him to work tirelessly, enduring mockery and disbelief from those around him. Noah didn't sit idly by, waiting for the flood to come. He acted on his faith, demonstrating that true belief often requires tangible steps toward the promise. His actions show that faith and works are intertwined, each giving life to the other. Consider the story of the Israelites as they stood before the Red Sea. They found themselves trapped between the water and the pursuing Egyptian army. In that moment of despair, Moses did not merely pray and wait for a miracle, he acted. He raised his staff, and God parted the sea. Their deliverance came not just through divine intervention, but also through their willingness to follow Moses' lead into the unknown. This story serves as a powerful reminder that faith requires movement. It's not enough to simply believe that God can make a way. You must also be willing to step forward into the path He creates. Taking action in faith is often accompanied by uncertainty and fear. It's easy to talk about faith when you're in a comfortable situation, but when faced with daunting challenges, it can feel paralyzing. We may find ourselves asking, what if I fail, or what if I'm not ready? These questions can create a barrier, keeping us from moving forward. However, faith does not mean the absence of fear, it means moving forward, despite that fear. It means trusting that God is with you even when you feel inadequate. It requires courage to act on what you believe, knowing that God will provide the strength you need along the way. Faith is also about taking responsibility for your part in the process. It is not solely relying on divine intervention while remaining passive. For example, if you're praying for a job, you also need to put in the effort to apply, network, and prepare for interviews. Faith without action can lead to frustration and a sense of helplessness. God often works through our efforts, guiding and supporting us as we take steps toward our goals. This proactive approach not only demonstrates your belief in God's promises, but also allows you to grow and learn along the way. Action often opens doors to opportunities that you wouldn't have encountered otherwise. When you take that leap of faith, even in small ways, you may find that God responds in unexpected and amazing ways. It's like a dance. You take a step forward, and God meets you in that movement. This collaborative relationship with God is what makes faith dynamic and alive. It's not just a one-way street where you sit and wait for blessings to fall into your lap. It's an active partnership where both you and God are engaged in a beautiful exchange. In many cases, the act of moving forward can clarify the direction you should take. When you're unsure about the path ahead, sometimes the best course of action is simply to start moving, even if it's in a direction that feels uncertain. Taking those initial steps can help you gain clarity and confidence. You may discover new strengths, skills, and insights that empower you to navigate your journey more effectively. The act of moving forward can often illuminate the way, guiding you closer to your goals and God's purpose for your life. It's essential to recognize that faith in action can look different for everyone. What requires action for you may not be the same for someone else. For some, it may mean volunteering, starting a new project, or reaching out to someone in need. For others, it may involve pursuing education or making a significant life change. Regardless of the specifics, the common thread is that faith demands a response. It calls you to engage with your beliefs actively and to reflect those beliefs in your choices and actions. When you approach your life with a mindset of faith in action, you begin to cultivate resilience. Challenges will come, that's a given. But when you're accustomed to acting on your faith, you'll find that you are better equipped to handle setbacks. You'll learn that failure is not the end, it's part of the process. Each misstep is a lesson that propels you forward. You'll develop a deep-rooted trust in God's ability to lead you, even when the way seems unclear. Embracing faith as an active journey encourages community. When you act on your faith, you often inspire others to do the same. Your actions can motivate friends, family, and even strangers to step out in faith in their own lives. This collective journey of faith strengthens the bonds within your community, fostering a spirit of support and encouragement. Together, you can navigate the challenges and triumphs, sharing the joys of acting on faith and witnessing how God works through each of you. In this journey, remember that faith requires action. It invites you to move, to grow, and to trust in God's leading. As you take steps forward, regardless of how small they may seem, you will find that your faith deepens, your vision expands, and your connection with God becomes more profound. Faith is not a static belief, it is a living, breathing journey that propels you into a life filled with purpose, adventure, and divine possibility. In a world filled with uncertainty and chaos, it's easy to become overwhelmed by worries and anxieties. We often find ourselves caught in a cycle of overthinking, replaying scenarios in our minds, and grappling with fears about the future. Whether it's concerns about our health, finances, relationships, or even our careers, worries can consume our thoughts and drain our energy. However, one of the most profound truths we can embrace is the power of surrendering our worries to God. This act of surrender is not just a passive release, it's a powerful choice that can transform our hearts and minds. Surrendering worries to God begins with the understanding that we are not meant to carry these burdens alone. The weight of our worries can feel heavy, but God invites us to cast our cares upon Him. In 1 Peter 5:7, we are reminded, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. This invitation is not just a suggestion, it's a call to actively release our worries into the hands of a loving and caring God. When we recognize that we don't have to bear these burdens by ourselves, we can find a sense of relief and freedom. The act of surrender is deeply personal. It involves acknowledging the worries that plague us and bringing them before God in prayer. This can be a vulnerable process as we confront our fears and uncertainties. Yet in this vulnerability, we find strength. When we lay our worries at God's feet, we are not merely voicing our concerns, we are also expressing our trust in His ability to handle our situations. It's a declaration that we believe God is bigger than our problems and that He has the power to intervene in our lives. Surrendering our worries does not mean that we abandon responsibility or become apathetic. Instead, it's about recognizing the limits of our control. Often, we worry about things that are beyond our influence. We cannot control the future or the actions of others, but we can choose how we respond. Surrendering to God means relinquishing our need to micromanage every detail of our lives. It's a conscious decision to trust that He is in control and that He has a plan, even when we cannot see it. When we hold on to our worries, they can create a barrier between us and God. Fear and anxiety can cloud our judgment and prevent us from experiencing the peace that God offers. In Philippians 4:6-7, we are instructed not to be anxious about anything but to present our requests to God with thanksgiving. When we surrender our worries in prayer, we create space for God's peace to fill our hearts. This peace surpasses all understanding and guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. It's important to remember that surrendering worries is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time event, but rather a daily commitment. Each day brings new challenges and uncertainties that can trigger our worries. Therefore, we must continually come before God and surrender our fears anew. This practice cultivates a habit of trust and reliance on God. It allows us to develop a deeper relationship with Him, where we learn to lean on His strength rather than our own. Surrendering our worries opens our eyes to the blessings that surround us. When we focus on our concerns, it's easy to overlook the goodness of God in our lives. As we release our worries, we become more attuned to the beauty of everyday moments, the laughter of a friend, the warmth of the sun, or the comfort of a kind word. This shift in perspective reminds us that even amidst struggles, God is at work and His blessings are abundant. In the practice of surrendering worries, we also learn the power of gratitude. Gratitude is a transformative attitude that shifts our focus from what is lacking to what we have. When we express thankfulness for the blessings in our lives, it helps to diminish the weight of our worries. Thankfulness opens our hearts to see God's faithfulness and provision, reinforcing the truth that He is always with us, even in the midst of uncertainty. The act of surrendering our worries can feel daunting. We may hesitate to let go of our anxieties because they have become so intertwined with our identities. Yet, it's crucial to remember that our worries do not define us. Our identity is rooted in Christ, who calls us to live in freedom. By surrendering our worries, we are making room for God to work in our lives and reveal His plans for us. We are choosing to step into the abundant life that He offers, free from the chains of anxiety. The journey of surrendering worries to God can also be accompanied by moments of doubt. It's natural to question whether God is truly listening or if our prayers are making a difference. However, it's essential to cling to the truth that God is always present. He hears our cries and cares deeply about our struggles. When doubts arise, we can remind ourselves of past instances where God has been faithful, helping us to cultivate trust and confidence in His promises. Surrendering our worries to God leads us to a place of profound peace. It allows us to exchange our anxieties for His rest, knowing that He is in control and that we are not alone in our struggles. As we learn to surrender daily, we will discover the freedom that comes from trusting in God's plan. This peace is not a one-time feeling, but a lasting state of being that transforms how we navigate life's challenges. By surrendering our worries, we open ourselves up to the peace, love, and grace that only God can provide. In times of difficulty and uncertainty, it can often feel as though we are standing at a crossroads with no clear path ahead. We face challenges that seem insurmountable, and it's easy to become overwhelmed by despair. It's in these moments of darkness that we must hold on to a powerful truth: God will make a way where there seems to be no way. This belief isn't merely a platitude, it's a profound promise that invites us to trust in His divine ability to navigate us through life's trials. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who faced impossible situations, yet God intervened in miraculous ways. Consider the Israelites as they stood at the edge of the Red Sea, pursued by the Egyptian army. The sea was vast, and there appeared to be no escape. Yet, in that moment of despair, God instructed Moses to raise his staff, and the waters parted, creating a path for his people. This story serves as a powerful reminder that even when circumstances seem dire, God can and will provide a way through the most difficult situations. When we confront our challenges, it's crucial to remember that our perspective is often limited. We tend to see only the obstacles in front of us, forgetting that God has a broader view. He sees the beginning and the end, the struggles and the solutions. When we find ourselves in seemingly impossible circumstances, we must remind ourselves that we serve a God who specializes in making a way when there appears to be none. His creativity and power exceed our understanding, and he can orchestrate events in ways we never imagined. Surrendering our worries and anxieties is essential as we await God's guidance. It can be tempting to grasp tightly to our fears, believing that we need to control the outcome. However, surrendering allows us to release our grip on the situation and trust that God is actively working behind the scenes. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and that we need his wisdom to navigate our circumstances. In doing so, we open ourselves to the possibilities of his divine intervention. Faith plays a critical role in believing that God will make a way. When we encounter difficulties, our faith can either falter or flourish. Choosing to believe in God's ability to make a way requires us to trust him, even when we cannot see the path ahead. This faith is not a blind leap into the unknown, rather, it is anchored in the character of God, his faithfulness, goodness, and love. When we lean on this truth, we cultivate the courage to move forward, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. God's way often unfolds in unexpected ways. We may envision a specific solution or outcome, but God's plans are often far greater than our own. His timing is perfect, and his methods are unique to each individual's journey. This means that we must remain open to the ways he might lead us. Sometimes the solution may come in the form of a conversation, an opportunity, or a revelation that we hadn't considered before. By staying attuned to his voice, we can navigate the twists and turns that life presents. When we share our struggles with others, we can also witness God's provision through community. Often we are not meant to walk our paths alone. God places people in our lives to support, encourage, and guide us through challenging times. As we lean on each other, we can share stories of how God has made a way in our own lives, inspiring one another to trust in his goodness. In doing so, we build a foundation of faith that reassures us that we are not alone in our struggles. It's also vital to remember that God's ways are often rooted in grace and mercy. When we face challenges, we may be tempted to dwell on our shortcomings or mistakes, believing that we don't deserve God's intervention. However, God's love is unconditional, and his desire is to walk alongside us, regardless of our past. In fact, it's often in our weakest moments that his strength shines brightest. When we surrender our worries and insecurities to him, we create space for his grace to flow into our lives, empowering us to move forward. The journey of trusting that God will make a way is not always straightforward. It may involve waiting, uncertainty, and moments of doubt. Yet it's in these times that our faith is refined. When we choose to trust God amidst the unknown, we cultivate a deeper relationship with him. We learn to rely on his promises, developing resilience and a steadfast spirit. This journey molds us into individuals who are not easily swayed by life's challenges, but are anchored in the hope that comes from faith. As we reflect on the promise that God will make a way where there seems to be no way, we can draw strength from the countless examples throughout history. From the heroes of the faith to the personal testimonies of those around us, these stories remind us of God's faithfulness and power. They encourage us to look beyond our immediate circumstances and trust in his ability to bring light into our darkness. Embracing the belief that God will make a way transforms our approach to life's challenges. Instead of succumbing to fear and anxiety, we are invited to step forward in faith, knowing that God is always working for our good. We can take comfort in the assurance that even in our most difficult moments, God is capable of creating pathways where we see none. By trusting in His divine intervention, we align ourselves with His will, allowing His presence to guide us through life's uncertainties.